So I just want to quickly give people a bit of context of how last year finished, in case people don't remember. Obviously, Shamrock Rovers double winners in the end, beating Cork City 2-0 in the FAI Cup final. And if you actually looked at the league table, Dan, it probably paints a false picture. Because I remember we did the preview last year, and there was a sense it could be a great title race potentially with a couple of different protagonists. Shamrock Rovers finished on 66 points, Derry 63, Shells 59, Bows 54, St. Pat's 52. But Rovers won that comfortably. They lost a couple of games towards the end when the league was pretty much in hand. So that's a pretty false picture, isn't it? It was a fairly comprehensively title win.
Well, listen, Johnny would be fond of the horses as I would. It's like they were sort of eased down over the last. They were sort of protecting their mark, so to speak. They were fine. I was looking at it last night. I mean, the one thing about the League of Ireland for people who maybe not, who might just dip in and out of it, is that it is you talk about the league title race, and you would imagine, it's the 7-8 month race to the title, but in reality, like this season, Shamrock Rovers have a 36 game league season, and everyone else, but in particular the 4 teams that are in Europe, who you would expect to be 4 of the challengers, they'll play 12 of their games in April and May. They play a third of their season in 2 of those months. Last year it was actually 13 in April and May for Shamrock Rovers, and then you had 5 quick ones in June. And in the games in April and May, they won 8, drew 4 and lost 1, and then they came back in June and they won 4 out of 5. That's basically 12 wins and 17, which in a league where in recent years you've had like 60, 61, 62 points being a marker, like that's where the league is won. That's always where the League of Ireland is won. That's effectively, I know Shell's won the last 3 games in the famous year, but again, they really won the league, in the early part of the season. Like the league you won, like the Cork City one, it was basically, won the first, 19 out of 20 games or something insane.
We were something like 16 points ahead.
It was
at the halfway stage. It was effectively over, and everyone kind of knew it was over.
Yeah, and you found like Cork City, a bit like Shamrock Rovers last year, sort of stumble on the run-in, but you had the gap to...
I suppose it's hard almost in a way to sort of keep your motivation up when you kind of feel like it's almost done. Like the Shamrock Rovers lads possibly were feeling like they were going to be celebrating every weekend, and it just sometimes doesn't happen. It kind of happens that way where you just fall over the line. But sort of exactly what you're saying there, last year Derry were second in the league, but they were very much second best. They were 3 points behind. They weren't close.
No,
it wasn't close.
It was a 10-point league, really. In terms of what it felt
Rovers
like.
lost 5 of their last 6 matches.
Yeah,
so they didn't need to be at their best to kind of. It was just a matter of when they were going to clinch it. But the other big storylines from last year, the people obviously know, Duff stepping down was huge. That was like last summer, a long time ago now. Stephen Kenny, St. Pat's are being talked about. Did you tip them to win the? A few people were. I think that seemed to be a sense that they were prime, but they had a very disappointing season, finishing 5th, as I mentioned. Rovers and Shells both getting into the group stages of Europe. It's a couple of months ago now. Obviously, it's the first time it's happened from an Irish perspective. Rovers, I think, earned just under 6 million. Shells just under 5 was my reason.
Yeah, I think Rovers, again, they get more from this sort of, based on their historic ranking, they're entitled to a greater piece of the pie. Yeah, and Shells threw away a lot of money by just bad results in games they should have got results in. Again, I feel like if you were transported back in time, or went forward in the future and said they only ended up with around 5 million quid, like it's like, sorry, what? A League of Ireland have got like clubs in the past have gone bust for debts of like 30 grand or something. You know what I mean? So like 5 million quid is it was an all right return.
Yeah, well, they're 2 bounties. Yeah, so that's kind of just throwing out some storylines just to get people caught up to speed from what we saw last year. And then the first round fixtures on Friday night, we have Rovers versus Dundalk on Friday, along with Derry hosting Sligo, Waterford versus Shells, Galway versus Drogheda. And then Sunday at the Aviva Stadium, Bows versus Pats. What's the crowd at that moment?
I think the last one yesterday was they'd sold over 17,000. They're basically going for like a lower bowl thing, probably like some of the sort of the lower tier sort of rugby games. They're doing like lower bowl and premium, but the big talk, like last year there was 33,000 at Bows and Shamrock Rovers, the highest ever attendance for a League of Ireland game. There's never been a sense it would be close to that. Probably a big talking point around that game just in the football circles has been, and sometimes online can give you a skewed representation of reality, but like some of the ambivalence of sort of Pats fans towards the game, some almost saying, well, it's a home match for Bows, why should we participate in this, which I think is moronic, just purely because I think it's a great, it's still an event that can sort of make the point that build it and they will come, and you want the best representation of both the clubs, even if it is a home game for Bows, and I get that. But I think I like the idea of these games in the Aviva. Some people say it's not traditional, it's a bit of a gimmick. I accept that. But when we talk consistently about how stadiums at times are restricted to like 4,000 or 5,000 people, and people like me say, "Oh, but more would go if they could." But you don't. I mean, you could say that without anyone, testing your theory. This is one that tests the theory, and yeah, maybe it's not traditional to start your league campaign in the Aviva, but even if no more tickets were sold, and even if some of them didn't turn up, that's still like 4 times the attendance of what would be at that game otherwise. How is that a bad thing? How is it a bad thing?
Gimmick is used as a negative in almost all its uses, but I actually think some gimmicks can be good, and this is a good one. It like makes it feel big time. It's a good way to kick off the season with a big game. Was it Bows Rovers last year? Was it?
Bows Rovers, and
ideally you'd put that maybe because that's the biggest fixture, probably, is it? Like that would
yeah, and it ended up being a bit unfortunate last year. Not unfortunate, but it ended up being between 2 European ties for Rovers, if you remember. So they played Molde. The Michael Noonan game was in. So Rovers probably. Like heads were gone, but there was a flurry of last minute sales, but they weren't necessarily, again, it was a Bows home match. It's Bows who are primarily benefiting, although the away team does get something from a profit share, just a small amount. But yeah, like I met someone recently who played in the league, has young kids, but wouldn't necessarily have the place to bring them on a Friday night. But on 2:00 on a Sunday afternoon, they can bring them to like the best, whatever, a top stadium in Ireland in a comfortable facility and watch the game. And you talk to people at the Bows Rovers game. I know Rod was in here at the end of year review talking about even just meeting like Rovers mates and having drinks around the stadium and stuff in a way that you wouldn't. I don't see any downside to it at all. And I don't like the depiction sometimes of as I said earlier, like the League of Ireland fan as being sort of, this is getting too popular, all this. And sometimes that's a caricature that's not representative.
I'm thinking of Dan specifically when I say
that.
But
that's not me. That's not me. No, I hate that mentality of, where have you been? And, where, don't hear you talking about much. I hate that. Like, I really despise that mentality and that perception. And, yet I will say that some of the negativity from League of Ireland fans towards these Aviva games, like, plays to the worst aspects of that stereotype. It's like, this is a good thing. Yes, maybe Bows are doing better than from everyone else, but like Pats and Bows at the moment are going to be in the receipt of council funding, or the plan is, in the case of Pats, to renovate their stadiums. Part of the case will be, if we had bigger stadiums, more people could go to the games. This is an example to prove that point. Why would you want it to fail? It's madness.
But yeah, so Bows Pats on Sunday, obviously a big one, but my attention will be on Derry City versus Sligo Rovers on Friday night. We have to start with James McClean. It's a huge story. I think I was saying yesterday that it's filled kind of a Damien Duff-sized content hole for some people, maybe because of his prominence and his propensity to get involved in kind of flashpoints, such as at the President's Cup last Saturday, where it was kind of like a full house. He sets up the winning goal, so his on-pitch performance is good. Afterwards, he goes to Instagram and says, it's called an orange bastard by, the Rovers fans, like, thanks a lot. And then there's a standoff with Sunday Times journalist Paul Rowan afterwards, Johnny. Like, talk about a start. Like, we thought it might maybe take a couple of weeks for James McClean to be embroiled in various incidents, but all of those in one game, and a pre-season game at that, sets the table very interestingly ahead of, what kind of season he will have and what the noise will be around him as well.
Yeah, no, you'd have to say if he was going to come back, he's come back with a bang, that's for sure. And, I for one, I suppose from a personal perspective, when I actually came into the League of Ireland, he was at Derry City. It was before he moved to England, and he was flying at the time, playing really, really well, and you'd have to say that the career he's gone on to have over there, it's nothing short of amazing. Probably his determination, really, on top of anything else. He's obviously got ability, but I would say he's absolutely maximised it as well. And maybe that's down to his personality, as Dan will often talk about it. It might be something to do with how that sort of motivation or that anger, that trying to prove people wrong all the time. It's sort of, you can see it coming out of him on the pitch, and he can't keep it in almost at times. And I think when you talk about filling the Damien Duff-sized hole, I'd imagine he'll continue to do that for the rest of the season. All right.
And what's big about this, Dan, is obviously Duff was a manager, so there's only so much he can influence. He was obviously very colourful in his press dealings, but as I mentioned there, like McClean, set up the winning goal. Like, what's he like as a player at this stage of his career? Like, for people who might be watching him over the next couple of months.
Well, the thing is, I mean, we're going to see him play in a completely different position. Like, he's going to be playing as the plan is anyway, as a sort of a holding midfielder, as a sort of a number 6. So it is completely different. Like even like the thing about James coming back, like he played 19 games for Wrexham this season, who are pushing for promotion to the Premier League. Like, you know, he was mixing it in that company, and I would have watched quite a few of the games coming up to Christmas that he was involved in, and he was doing fine. Now, he was playing at left wing back, you know, in a sort of a Phil Parkinson team that has a kind of firm enough identity. So this is a little bit different, because he's going to be playing as a six, it would seem. But I suppose in certain games, and you can see it a little bit on Saturday, that, you know, if they're comfortable, he might get the license to sort of press on a bit. He's clearly still in amazing physical condition. I think, you know, the fact that he's able to mix it. Like I was over in Lincoln last week doing a piece about Lincoln and why Lincoln in League One are connected so closely with the League of Ireland. And, you know, I was at one of their games and I watched it, and basically League One now is possibly the equivalent of the Championship 10, 12 years ago in terms of just the financial levels. We used to have, you played with Johnny Maguire when he went straight from, you know, the League of Ireland into a decent Championship side. It's harder for our players to do that now because I think the levels, it's not, the League of Ireland has actually improved. It's just that those leagues have just really improved. You know, League One is now better than the Scottish top flight, like in terms of take out the top clubs, you know. So James has come from the Championship. This is the thing. He's not coming back from like League One. You know, he has been playing at a level that is beyond pretty much all of the players in the league at the moment, you would say, you know, with the exception of the younger ones who are coming up and may get there. So I'm interested to see him in a slightly different position, because like it's going to be a challenge for him if a game is lower tempo to try and like dictate the tempo as a midfielder. You know, he plays on sort of, as you mentioned, as Johnny says, he plays on the fire. Sometimes being out wide is good. Get a tackle in.
I could see him putting in some crunchy tackles in this.
Yeah,
like Roy Keane Overmars setting the tone against Sligo on Friday night.
Yeah, but it's obviously, you know, at times, like I think Derry are a strong side, so are they going to be allowed to have the ball some weeks? And it'll be a slightly different challenge from whereas I think the likes of the big games against Rovers and the sort of the top teams who are probably going to try and attack and dominate Derry. That's where I wonder where you'll see the best of them. I kind of wonder, will we see the best of them at times against a team who just sits in? Like, that's going to be obviously a question mark, you know?
Yeah, but it's like, I suppose I heard him talk about it, and in that it's a position that he's going to practice and become more comfortable in as he gets there. And you have to remember as well, when you're coming back from the level that he's played at, he's also seen some incredible players playing in that position. He's going to have been picking things up from them, you know, constantly. And I suppose on top of that there as well, just from a Derry City point of view, bringing himself back in along with his brother Patrick, it gives him a real Derry identity. It's two strong signings to have in your team. It's gonna, you know, the fans are going to be delighted to have them back in there. And as I say, it's, you know, it's a city with a very proud tradition of soccer, and to have the two boys back in there, I'd say is brilliant for them.
Is he just going to be getting Orange Bastard sung at him for the forthcoming season now? Is this what? Because it's funny. There's a quote I know you talked to him. Was it 2-3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And like he said, here in England, it's genuine hatred. I still think I'm going to get abuse, but it'll just be people trying to wind me up. And he sounds very sanguine about it there. Whereas his reaction on social media about being called Orange Bastards, maybe, is this going to be kind of a running thing throughout the season?
Yeah, I would say that, like, I would say that he wasn't, that social media post on Saturday, I wouldn't say he was raging about it, but it's part of what, like Johnny was saying there. Like, you think about it, he's come through probably, you know, the richest time to be a footballer possible, you know, and at times in his career he would have been on really, really good money. And for someone like, now it's sad, it's depressing, like he's born in the 80s. Like, how many players now are outfield players that were born in the 80s are now actively playing at a level, like not too many. And that's because like he has that desire to sort of to keep going. And I guess, you know, part of what's keeping him going is he always needs to be motivated, I think, by something. He needs to be challenged. Other people who've made the money, he would have just get to a point where they're like, it just doesn't matter that much anymore.
So this is a good thing, maybe,
made
for
my
him,
money.
that he's getting.
I think that's what he needs. I think he needs it. Yeah.
Fire.
He said it in the same interview. He said it's a compliment. He said if you weren't getting any abuse, you'd be a nobody. That'd be worse. And that's probably the best insight to his mentality you can probably get. Like, there is that main character element of, he'd be disappointed in a way, I would think, or would take it as an insult if he just slipped back in and he was unnoticed at a stadium.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, like, he's had that attention Like, this is his default now. So, like, he's had it for 15 years effectively. So, yeah, I don't know, is he going to get... I mean, obviously, Shamrock Rovers away. I think there will be certain games away from home where he'll get a bit. And Derry have always had that thing. They'd always have this chant, you know, what's it like to... It used to be, what's it like to have a queen, would be a sort of a chant to be aimed at the Derry fans or whatever. And, like, variations of the same thing. And he was prepared. Like, he knows that. Even when I did a story about him coming home, like, you even see on social, like, you see low, and a lot of this would have been maybe people in England, but like London Derry and all this sort of trying to get at, welcome back to London Derry, and he'll hear stuff like that, you know, from even opposing fans, just trying to wind them up. But I think at other times and other places, it'll be very pantomime. It's not going to be like, he likes to wind people up. People will try and wind them up. I don't think it's going to be vicious, unless, like, there's venues where people are right on top of you, where, of course, you can respond to someone. They're going to be way closer to you than they might be at certain grounds in the UK, like, you know, and that's the only time the flashpoint could maybe bubble over. I don't know what you think.
I don't know. I suppose initially, obviously in England, he suffered the effects of effectively standing up for his principles. Probably that's where it derived from. But, you know, when you come back or when you go to grounds in Ireland, you're going to get abuse and you're going to get stick, and as you say, particularly if you're one of the better players. But I suppose people also know now they've got a backstory on him and they've seen him react to certain things, so they're going to know that they can push his buttons to some degree. But personally, I don't think it's that he courts it. I don't really think it's that, but I don't think he doesn't enjoy it at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description.
Well, he didn't have to post on Instagram. Like, he drew a lot of attention to it that people wouldn't have maybe known otherwise.
Yeah, I think that, like, that is part of his. Yeah. That is part of his personality a bit. Like, there is that in him. I think if something is said and it can needle away at him, I think it's just the way he does it. And again, like, it's so at odds with how media trained footballers are taught how to behave, and we're probably conditioned to people doing things in that way. It's just not the done thing. But I guess, again, like, that's part of the longevity of his career, is that he's done things his own way. But that fire, and you speak to people who know him, would say, but yes, occasionally it can go too far, but part of that is what allowed him to have this lengthy career, to win over 100 caps for his country, to do things that just didn't seem possible, you know, for someone sort of, you know, who come into the game at a good level, like, relatively late, based now where you have a lot of academy players and products and stuff. He was not mapped, and he came out of it. But I don't know, you'll hear it. Have you ever got any Northerner? I know you're Donegal, but have you ever got anything on...
I actually only ever once that I got it from the sideline, kind of a thing, and I suppose I laughed it off at the time. It's just, you know, it's one of those things that you don't really take
Northerner,
on. I'm probably a little bit different from James in that I probably, when I was playing, I didn't shoot from the hip as much. I'd have been quite considered when I'd been talking to people. Maybe
you turn around and say, "I'm from Donegal."
Well, there is a bit of that, all right, but
that doesn't matter. To be clear, in the mind of, there is no distinction between Donegal and Derry. I think that's the important point. You're going to get it now.
Yeah,
oh God, no, I'm editing that out for sure.
Well, Donegal's one of us. No. Well, that's pretty much not it. You know, I feel Martin O'Neill is going to dial in now.
I'm definitely editing that out. So, like, this, like,
yeah, it comes with the territory. Yeah,
it does to some degree. Like, and as I say, you kind of, what he is right about, and it's something that stuck with me before too. That someone said, if you're not a good player, you won't really get the abuse, because they don't need to, if you know what I mean. If you're not having an effect on an opposition fan, or, you know, if you're not a player that has an effect in the league, you don't really hear about it. Whereas if you are one of those players that's making a difference, or that is one of the better players, you're much more likely to be targeted, obviously.
And you would notice as well, the geography of some of the League of Ireland grounds, it's probably way more easy to hear things, like, you know, when you're taking a throw relative to, like, the bigger English stadiums that James spent a lot of his time. Although I know, like, I've spoken to him about this before, he in the last couple of years, he was down in League One and League Two with Wrexham. They got promoted both years, but that put him back to a different type of stadium, you know, where all of a sudden it's a bit more on top of you. But that's a part, as you know, you've had it, I'm sure. Like, which grounds do you know, even if you're not a target of it, you might know that the player in your team are going to get a going over? Like, where would you be thinking?
Yeah, I suppose thinking back on it, even, like, obviously, like, I was very lucky to play in Turner's Cross for as long as I did, and it's an absolutely amazing place to play football. And you know, when things were going well for us down in Cork, it was phenomenal. Like the atmosphere, and you've 8,000 people, and there's flares, and it was brilliant. When it's going the other way, there was a couple of years where we had it where it was a little bit the other way, and it's the exact opposite, where they're so on top of you and you can hear every word. You know, you might give away a pass or something and there's a fella 5 yards behind you and he is giving you dog's abuse, and you're like, well, look, I actually didn't really mean to give it away. It just happened. But there's other places, like I suppose there's a story now that wouldn't be not particularly for this forum now, but it happened to me up in Sligo actually with the Bows fans. They were directly behind me. And probably actually, speaking of Bows fans, Dalymount Park's tough place to go now. Tough place to go. I had one experience up there in my first year in the League of Ireland, as far as I can remember. We were 1-0 down with about 20 minutes to go, and there was an incident with a steward, and some of the supporters standing around the tunnel, I remember that they heard it and heard me sort of reacting to the steward, and for 20 minutes I got
what sort of incident?
Pelters. It was a nothing incident, really. The ball had rolled down the tunnel and we were 1-0 down, so I was looking to get it back quickly, and the steward was looking directly at me. And the ball was rolling to his foot, and I just sort of looked at him as if, just stop the ball for me. I don't mind. I'll run down and get it. And he just looked me directly in my eyes and lifted his foot, and the ball just rolled straight all the way down the tunnel. And I just for a split second, I just lost the plot, and I shouted at him, and expletive laden maybe, and then around the tunnel I could see the lads, and they had all heard me. And honestly, for 20 minutes it was a nightmare. But yeah, it's sure, look at that as Dan.
You're aware of it, like you are aware of it.
Of course you are. You're aware of it, and to some degree as well. Like you do enjoy it because there's a buzz to it, there's an adrenaline to it, and I suppose having stepped away from the league now, I don't have that anymore. You don't get that on a Friday night. You don't get the good or the bad, and you miss it, like.
So Sligo, what happened with Bows fans in Sligo? You teased us with that. Sorry,
I did, but
maybe the details might be.
The details of it will certainly have to stay out. But it was effectively, it was at a stage in the game where I don't know what someone gone down injured or the ball went out, but there was a break in play anyway, and I was playing right back, and I don't know if you know where the away fans are in Sligo, but they're sort of right where the right back would be playing down the hill, let's say. And so they were right beside me. When there was a break in play, I just happened to be standing right in front of them on my own. No one near me. There was no one I could speak to. There was no one I could sort of, waste a couple of minutes.
Couldn't look busy or something.
Couldn't do anything. There was nothing I could do. And look, there was a few. I suppose the first couple of things they came after me about were getting let go from Cork, my knees, and then one fella in particular. Actually, I remember it so well. I was looking, I turned around, because I actually quite enjoyed it. I kind of had the crack with it at the time. I could see him at the back of the stand, and he came walking down. He actually came walking down whatever number of steps it was and came right up to the front. And we had a bit of an exchange then. I was very funny now. But absolutely can't be repeated here, unfortunately. But yeah, look at things like that.
I think you told me this before. He made a comment about your sister until you point out you didn't have a sister. I mean, we don't need to give any more details, but it was just like
something like
those
that.
lines.
Yeah, exactly. And funny.
So this is a flavour of what James McClean might explain.
I think the point is like, if you're someone who's acutely aware of what's going on around you, there's plenty there, and every time he goes to take a throw in or a corner in certain places, people are going to be coming. But it's part again. I don't want to be clutching the pearls too much either, because it is part of the game as well. So
no, I suppose when you heard that it was Orange Bastard, naturally people will be like, oh, after what he's been through in the UK, it's like a real nasty negative. Is this a real like disgraceful thing? They call him an Orange Bastard, and this man, his identity is important to him. Like I can see people saying that, but you're saying it's kind of no, it was more like I don't know.
Yeah, like I mean, it
was more.
It's just anything to raise him.
Yeah,
that's effectively what it is. It's not necessarily the content of it. It's just something to try and wind him up.
No, exactly. It is that, but the thing is as well, it's particularly sensitive because you speak to someone again from Derry, from the north of Ireland. It's very much their identity. Yeah, like they are conscious sometimes of how they're not viewed as, as one of them, like one of us by people sort of further south. So it's a jab, like it's a jab just to wind someone up, but it's a bit close to the bone, I think, as well too. So that's why you get the response.
Yeah. So obviously Derry then, I suppose after finishing second last year and signing James McClean, and you mentioned his brother as well, are they firm title challengers or are Rovers? Like you just look at Rovers and the players Rovers have brought in. And obviously Michael Noonan's still there as well. You know, didn't leave in January, so they have him for the time being anyway. Like Rovers bringing in Jake Mulroney, Adam Brennan, Jack Byrne back from the loan. Obviously himself and Stephen Bradley have patched that up. Like, are Rovers like a head and shoulders above everybody again?
Yeah, I mean, I think Derry and Shells. I have a feeling Shells could go closer than Derry. I don't know, but I could be wrong about Derry. I think Derry's going to be very much about vibes. Derry just have 4 home games to start the season, just because they're meant to play away in Dundalk the second week of the season. Because Dundalk's pitch and floodlights are being redone, they flipped that game. You know, it'll come back to Derry later in the year, so they have a great chance to win their. If they could somehow get 10 out of 12. And vibes and all the good vibes with James and Patrick and all that, I think they can be challengers. I feel like in a month we'll actually have a very good idea about Derry. I think purely if you're going to put the squads on paper, I think Shells, with the exception maybe of lacking an obvious goal scorer, I think they have a really good squad. I think they have a really good midfield in particular, and they have a good age profile. And I like Shells. I think they can.
Does Joey O'Brien deserve huge credit for obviously getting the job on short notice unexpectedly last summer, and now, you know, obviously the European run the group campaign itself wasn't great, but even getting that far is a huge achievement, and now Dan's talking him up as being right in there. Like that, are people reflecting? Is he finally kind of not stepped out of Duff's shadow, but like people are giving him the credit now as well?
Yeah, and I think he fully deserves it as well. I mean, after Duff stepped out, there was a very definite shift in how they played. Like, he really put a stamp on that team very quickly. And there was a couple of performances last year where, like, I remember when they played Linfield in Windsor Park, and I know they're a better team than Linfield. They are, and they possibly should be beating Linfield. But I watched that whole game, and I thought Shelbourne were absolutely exceptional on the night. And you could see sort of Joey stamp on the team in terms of rotations, in terms of movements. They were all so well coached, so well clued in. And I think having another pre-season under his belt now to be able to even more so put a stamp on the team, you know, will really stand to him too. And as Dan says, maybe you could argue they're lacking a number 9. That's the only area you could say, have they got someone in their team that's going to get them the 20-25 goals that they probably will need to catch Shamrock Rovers? I'm not sure they do.
What Shells have done, and probably the most interesting with Shells, is they've partnered with this company, Jamestown Analytics. I think we spoke about this maybe before at the end of the year when Aidan was here. And Jamestown Analytics is Tony Bloom's company, who have basically powered Hearts' success this year. And basically, it's a real data-driven recruitment model, and that's why Hearts, like Claudio Braga, I think he was in the 2nd division in Norway, and they've signed a guy from Iceland, Hearts, and they've just plucked lads from around Europe whose profile may suggest, geez, he's only playing at that level, but they've identified him as a good fit, and it's really worked for Hearts. Jamestown only can deal with one club in a particular country, and Shells have signed a partnership with them.
Have they got any random guys in that you're like, oh?
Yeah, so this is the thing. They've signed a striker from Portugal called Rodrigo Freitas, who was in the Portuguese 3rd division. But
had me at Rodrigo.
Yeah, exactly.
Being a big
yeah, I like it already. But he scored goals at a lower level in Portugal, but they've obviously identified him as one. And then there's a Swedish winger whose name escapes me, but he was playing, I think, in the top division in Sweden. But yeah, and also they have broken the transfer record to sign Oren Casey from Cliftonville, and even though that's from Cliftonville up the road, I'm told that Jamestown were part of that too, and they've identified this. That
caught the eye when obviously it's the record signing. Like, is he as good as that would suggest?
I don't know. I don't know if he's a right-sided centre half. They have paid over 100 grand for him. I think people think he could be a future Northern Ireland international potentially. He's quite young. I don't know is the honest answer, but they're obviously spending to get there. So that's the thing with some of the other teams, like Derry City have gone for, with the exception of obviously McClean and a couple of loanees, they've pretty much gone for players from within the league that it's like the known quantities. Shells have a couple of unknown quantities, so you just don't know.
Yeah, I think the Derry one's a very significant shift this year in terms of their recruitment policy. Like last year they had brought in a few from Scotland, and it just didn't really work. Like at no stage last year did you feel that Derry were settled, or that they were that they really had an identity or knew what they were. And I actually think it's a really pivotal season for them now. They've probably had enough time and enough investment for them to be properly challenging for the league. As I said, I know they were second last year, and second is not a bad result, but they were comfortably second. Now, in saying that, I do think they've recruited very well. Obviously, 2 lads coming in, but there's one. I watched Waterford quite a few times towards the end of last season, And I thought two of the most impressive players down there were Glenfield and Olayinka, particularly when they played together. Thought they were brilliant. But I love Olayinka. I think he's a terrific player.
Ex-Arsenal. He was an Arsenal trainee, James Olayinka. Yeah.
He is, but he's got an awful lot of very good attributes. Very good athletically. Excellent touch, good vision, good passer of the ball, can get forward, can defend. He's got the lot, and I think Derry fans will really enjoy watching him this year.
Yeah, and from a Rovers perspective, like the Jack Byrne thing just caught my eye. Obviously, like that was a very intriguing kind of setup last year when he goes halfway through the season on loan. And he's back now? Is he still a key player, or is he going to be a bit part player at this stage of his career? Like what's his kind of return going to be like?
Yeah, no, like he was basically exiled to Dubai, which is probably not the worst place to be exiled. I think Jack really likes Dubai.
I was reading Stephen Bradley quotes, and he was making it seem like there was no issue whatsoever. He's like, Jack was great. Like, Jack wasn't, he wasn't injured or anything. He was just, he just wanted to play a bit more football.
I think. Listen, it's a small league. It's a 10-team league. You've got 4 teams in Dublin. If I think, and I've no problem saying this, I think if the Jack Byrne Stephen Bradley dispute had happened in England, where you maybe let's say there were a club in London or Manchester or wherever, the Northwest, where you have like 20 clubs around you, I think Jack Byrne probably would have been shipped out to one of those clubs. It's just a lot more complicated in Ireland when you have someone who's 30 who doesn't want to 30 this year, I think, sorry, doesn't want to live away again, doesn't want to go play overseas again. It's such a small league that if you let him go to one of your rivals, well, then he could come back and kill you. He's that good. So the percentage call was to sort it out, and they did sort it out. There was a little bit of, the other clubs were interested, but I don't think it ever really advanced. And again, why would you let, say, Shelbourne, who are coming to get you, give them a player who you've played against him, who on his day can be unplayable. The question for Jack Byrne now is, and look, I will say Bradley and Byrne, they're a very close relationship, but they fight. That's sort of
Stephen Bradley fighting with someone. I don't believe.
But Bradley, but I think they have so much in common. Like Stephen Bradley and Jack Byrne were both the best players of their generation at 16, and both went away, and it didn't quite happen for them. And they have so much in common, and in terms of their characters and personalities, so they're probably going to bounce off each other a bit. What Jack Byrne probably has to accept, and maybe people may not be aware what happened with Jack Byrne, it was that he wasn't going to play in a game. I think it was against Derry. Having played in the European game during the week, and there was basically a disagreement on the training the day before the game when he realised he wasn't in the first team in the 11v11, and he ended up sort of leaving the training pitch, and that was that. That was effectively the issue. What Jack Byrne will have to accept, and as he's getting a bit older, is that he might not play every game and every minute, and he might sometimes have to be taken out of the team. I think that probably was part of the discussions that they had. But you know what he's like when he's good.
Oh, look, I suppose when you say not playing every minute, Graham Burke was probably similar last year, where he played when it was important, and that's probably going to be similar for Jack this year. Personally, I'm delighted to see him back in the league. I'm delighted he's back when I'm retired as well, because I remember we were playing in Tala, and I was actually playing centre midfield, and he played a 1-2 around our number 6, and I was right behind him when he bent one into the top corner against Sligo. I mean, he's an exceptional talent, absolutely exceptional talent. So it's even from the perspective of making up with Stephen Bradley, or just showing that, there's a lot these days where if someone makes a mistake, or if someone falls out, there's no coming back from it. You make a mistake in a job, you never get back into that job. You should be sacked or whatever, or you fall out with someone, there's no coming back from it. You can come back from it. You absolutely can, and it's good to see them make up. And as I say, it's going to be like a new, provided he's in the right headspace and he's had a good pre-season and all that, it's like a new signing for Shamrock Rovers, and look, I'm delighted to see him.
Just to throw somebody out, just because you mentioned how good Jack Byrne is, who's the best League of Ireland player, since you've been covering it, or that you played with? We were talking about Richie Towell upstairs because he was on a podcast today talking about Daily Mount Park, and we were just laughing about his comments about it. But he obviously had an unbelievable season that year with Dundalk, and Shawnee Maguire was mentioned had a great year. Who would be the best player?
See, it's tough.
Or in a moment of time, like a one-season player.
Yeah, because I think
let's do it like that. The best kind of single season you've seen.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's good because, for example, you saw Seamus Coleman come along and you go, wow.
Yeah, no, I don't mean that.
He was only here for 18 months.
What was the best single season you saw from a League of Ireland player?
Oh, I mean, I think Jack Byrne, when he came home in 2019, 2020, was really good. That time you were talking about him there, Shawnee Maguire's last season at Cork. If I was to go back in time and maybe it's more of a personal preference, watching Paddy McCourt in full flight was amazing. And Wes Hoolahan. I mean, Wes Hoolahan, there was those sort of maverick sort of playmakers that we had, Joseph Indo, in that era. It'd be hard to pick between them. Like Paddy McCourt had a season at Derry. Generally, it's the season before they go back.
Yeah.
Where Keith Fatty had a year at Pats before he went to Birmingham, which was exceptional. Richie Towell was amazing, Darrell Horgan, but like Jack Byrne's level, I think in that 2019 or so was good. I don't know. What would you think?
I'd say for me, and obviously I might have a little bit of bias in it, but Shawnee Maguire 2017, I don't really think I don't think there'll ever be a player that'll have that much effect on a season in 6 months. Like he scored more goals in half a season than anyone else scored in the full season.
Yeah.
He left halfway through to go to Preston, and he was still top scorer at the end of the year. Like it was one of those seasons where it didn't really matter if we played well or not, and we kind of knew that we were solid. We were a good team. We had a lot of really good players, but you kind of knew that even if we had a 6 out of 10 game, he'll still score. He'd probably score 2.
And it's just a case of, it's not as simple as like get the ball to Shawnee, or is it? Like, is it very much?
It sounds like something you'd hear at an under 10 game, but it's not unlike it. It was just his level. Like I remember before he left that season, we had a training session. It was the first training session back after the mid-season break, and it's not that often that someone would make you feel stupid in training. Like really. Is so far ahead of you that they make you feel stupid. And I remember that session like it was yesterday. He made me feel it was as if I couldn't get near him. Absolutely couldn't get near him. So yeah, for me it'd be him. But as you say, like a couple of years later, you had Jack coming along, and again a totally different kind of a player, like completely different, just able to run a game on his own, and never looks like he doesn't have time. Always on, and I mean, would see a pass before anyone else, kind of. I suppose other ones like that I can think of that I would have played with, Colin Healy, like underrated. You don't hear people talking about him really. What a player! What I mean, his attitude, everything about him. And I'm not surprised. Obviously, he's going to have that effect on Kerry. I've absolutely no doubt. But yeah, if you're looking for one, it'd be Shawnee.
Yeah, just came to me there when you were discussing Jack. I wanted to ask you about Michael Noonan. I was reading your kind of quotes with Stephen Bradley after the President's Cup, and he's staying put for the time being. Hoffenheim were in for him, which would have been an interesting move. You mentioned Celtic and Chelsea maybe kind of lurking, because obviously now if he moves in the summer he can go to the UK. Is that correct?
Yeah. He turns 18 in July.
Yeah, so like what's his kind of, I suppose, medium-term future? Like, how do you see it shaking out?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, and it's funny, like you see that question you raised there about best players you've seen and stuff, and it may well be that in 10 years' time we're talking about Noonan, Melia, Ojin Vuna. We now see all these players, like these lads are the.
I was actually going to ask you to rank them or rate them.
Oh God, okay.
The three.
Owen Elding has gone to Hibs as well, who's a bit older, but this is the thing, like we are, maybe this generation's Robbie Keane or Damien Duff or whatever, we're going to see them all here, Now, of course, it could be this generation's Bradley or Jack Byrne, where it doesn't quite happen for them, but they're amazing at 16. Alec Noonan is, like, when you think about it as well, this is one of these time tunnel things where, like, the fact that Shamrock Rovers are able to turn down a 7-figure bid for a player, like, that says something. When generally clubs come here and try and offer like 50 grand and a bag of balls, I think they'd be happy with that over there. Now you have a club that can at least turn down that money and back themselves, and back the player, I guess, that what he's done for them. And you have to say as well, to be fair, and that's probably where Sligo Rovers would struggle with Elding, because he wasn't registered to play for Ireland. Underage football too. Noonan is also like really, really good at the under-17 World Cup, where he's matching up against the top. Like Barcelona were actually sort of half looking at him as well. Now, they went another way, but I think he had maybe a possibility, an offer to go over and have a look at the place and stuff. So, this is looks like a very, very good player, and speaking to people who've played against him, they will say that he would come on, he's 16. And I suppose Kevin Ferguson played in the league at 14, 15. When you think about it, what they have in common is that they can look after themselves like an adult, even though they're technically a child, like in terms of they're a minor. The fear you always have with those players is that maybe other players will physically catch up with them when they get to 19, 20, 21, that they have an advantage now. But I think Noonan plays with real intelligence. But what I must say I like about him, and it's a difficult one to speak about, but it's his mentality. Like, and I'll be careful about this, but like he had a day last year, like he's 16 years of age, maybe just turned 17, a very high profile court case involving his dad, like going to jail. It's on the public record that this is something that happened. And that night he goes down to Waterford and he scores a goal in the game, and you're just thinking, like, that's an elite mentality. Like, he's going through days there that would floor other people. So he's just got something about him, and it's hard to actually quantify what that is. To answer your question about what the medium-term future is, I think it's clear by not taking the European option now that he's going to go to England. He's going to go to a top, say England, or Celtic are very much in the game, and there obviously is a Dermot Desmond Celtic Shamrock Rovers connection there. But would Celtic pay around £2 million for a young player?
Celtic after what you've seen from them in the last couple of months?
I know what it did. I know.
Martin O'Neill was there. I'd say definitely go. The good vibes there with the Martin O'Neill factor.
But the Irish football, like, I know Irish football fans will rage at another young Irish player going to Celtic if that's what happens, and also I think that Celtic fans can be very harsh on young Irish players as well. So, but like, he was over there over Christmas and having a look at it. Maybe something like the Chelsea type of buy would be one that'd be interesting, because they'd probably buy him and loan him, and go to I don't know, one of their partner clubs. But he's going to do very well. Like, he's going to sign, whatever happens, he's going to sign a 4 or 5 year deal in the summer with a top club. I don't know if you've seen much. Like, what do you think of him? But he's got, his ceiling seems to be very, very high.
Yeah, no, only bits and pieces, and I suppose I'm largely anecdotally hearing about him. Let's say from Richie Towell and boys that I would, let's say, trust their opinion. And the way they speak about him is that he's a bit different. All right. I suppose going to his next move is a crucial one, kind of. And if you look at, you have to have something when you make that next step. You really do have to have something a little bit different. Like, a prime example would be Johnny Kenny, for example, at Celtic, where Johnny's gone over and he's done quite well. But in order to make that step up over there, you have to have something a bit extra. It's not good enough to just be quicker than everyone in Ireland, because when you move over to England or when you move over to Scotland, for example, all of a sudden everyone's quick. So you have to have a different intelligence, a different touch, a different. It's kind of hard to quantify it at times, but from everything I've heard about Michael Noonan, he might well have that, and I hope he does.
So we could have Mason Mealy at Spurs, Ozunvuna at Arsenal, and maybe Noonan at Chelsea. It'd be handy for you to go over. You could take them all in on one Premier League weekend.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be nice.
Come along on that trip.
I suppose the question is, like, how realistic is it for any of them to play for those clubs before they're 20? Like, that's the thing, and maybe not at all. Like, look at Troy Parrott. This is the thing. Like, Troy Parrott's having an amazing career now, but it didn't happen for him at Spurs. And like, I know it's not quite in the League of Ireland wheelhouse now, but like, obviously Mason Mealy has gone over there, and I'm looking forward to seeing where he is in the autumn. Like, is he out on loan somewhere? And some people would say, and this is the thing that Noonan and these people face, do you join a really big club where look, you're not going to go into there, you might be around their squad to train, but you sort of know you're not going to play in the short term, versus like Sam Curtis was highly talked about. He went to Sheffield United when he maybe could have gone to some of those bigger clubs, and people thought he might play, wasn't quite able to play, and then you end up getting loaned down the levels, and it's not as so like. And
the European route, which we're seeing now,
it's a tough one.
Like, traditionally, wouldn't be something people from this part of the world would do that much.
Tough one, and I think as well. Listen, you have to just be realistic as well. That players have to make decisions. Like, the advantage of going over at 18 with a profile versus 16 with a reputation, like, as what it would just, but like less evidence of first team football. Like, these lads, you have to be honest. Like Ozunvuna and Mealy, I have a rough awareness of the figures. Like, I mean, they're going over in 5 year deals. Probably in this sort of 7, 8, 9, 10 grand a week territory, like for 4 or 5 years. That's a very hard thing to turn down when you're 18, even if you know that you may not necessarily play for that club, or the percentage chance of you playing for that club is smaller, way smaller than it might be if you went to, again, like a championship, like a Preston or something. But obviously you have to look at the bigger picture in a volatile profession,
like, they're committing millions of pounds to the fee. Like, they obviously rate these guys. It's different to like someone going over prior to the new rules.
Well, like you did, you went to Wolves, whatever. You're like, I don't know what your first deal was over there, but you weren't on 10 grand a week.
It wasn't 7, 8, 9, 10 grand a week. It wasn't even 700 or 800 quid a week. But I suppose, looking back on it now, I think it's a very positive shift, really, and that lads are going over that little bit older. You're going over more mature, probably with a more awareness of what first team senior football is all about. And I suppose in terms of the club that you go to, it really depends on. It's a perspective kind of a thing. If you go to one of the bigger clubs and you look at it like a tree, I suppose. If you're joining a club at the top of the tree, there's a lot more branches to hit on the way down. If you're leaving them, if you're going out on loan or you're joining a new club.
Good point, yeah.
And I suppose that adds maybe to the longevity of your career then as well. Like if you say that you go to one of the bigger teams, let's say on a 4 or 5 year deal, and it doesn't work out, doesn't quite work out. Well, if you drop down to a team in the Championship on a 3 year deal, all of a sudden you've got 8 years on pretty good money. And like, it's not all about money, don't get me wrong. Of course, it's about achieving things in the game, and it's about, fulfilling your potential as best you can. But equally, it's a short career.
Security.
And it's security. You've got to do as well as you possibly can out of it too. So, that would be one way that you could look at it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we have 2 Irish teenagers, soon to be a third, when Never Noonan Dudley, that are going over on multi-million-pound transfer fees. And if you want to, I'm basically thinking of it from an Ireland context for everyone in the road. Like, you want one of them to break out and have a proper Premier League star, which you've been crying out for a long time.
Yeah. And look, the fact is, I think one of them probably will. You just don't know which one. That's the thing. It's and again, the definition of success now is the levels have got so high. It may well be that none of those 3 may not play for those clubs that they join. But if they end up, look, we have so few players in the Premier League now that if one of them, as Johnny says, is a good point. If their next drop down the branch is just to a Burnley or whatever, but you're a really proper Championship player, because look, even someone like Kelleher has effectively dropped down a branch to leave Liverpool to get to Brentford. He's going to go back up again. But for some others, like I think Troy Parrott's a good example. He dropped down a couple of those branches, but. Look,
and I suppose to bring it back to sort of where this all starts, it just goes to show you how good a breeding ground the League of Ireland can be for this calibre of player. Like to have 3 lads of that level come along at the one time, you'd have to argue it's probably not a fluke then, and things are at some level anyway being done right, and hopefully it's something that we can progress on.
Yeah, it's certainly been an interesting subplot the last couple of years. One last team I wanted to just kind of talk about in a bit of depth before we get predictions is St. Pat's. I mentioned at the start, like Stephen Kenny, a lot of fanfare for last year, didn't go very well. Like what's the mood going into this season? Like, are they being talked about as title contenders like they were, or is it kind of taking a bit of a step back expectation wise?
Yeah, I heard Stephen Kenny say last week, well, no one's tipping us this year. And he was sort of, he wasn't saying that in a, no one's tipping us, like, maybe that would be the line if they end up having a great season. But it was more, I think he was trying to suggest, God, people overrated us before last year. All these people tipping us got a bit carried away. Different vibes this year. Not again, like maybe they're just lying beneath the shadows waiting to burst out. But I think you get the vibes that even within their fan base there's been a little bit of unhappiness over the winter, a bit of unease. A lot of players have left. There is obviously time for players to come in because the window here will be open until the 3rd week of February, and what you might see is clubs sign lads who didn't get who are in situations in the UK that didn't move before the window closed there, and you might see lads arriving on loan in the next couple of, in fact I'd be very surprised if you didn't see that happen with some of these clubs. But yeah, they're going to have a strange year. They're not in Europe, so they don't have those 12 games in April and May that I'm talking about. They'll be playing through the summer, a bit like Bows last year, who had a very structured season, and probably they ended up taking the European spot from Pats effectively. But yeah, they've lost Melia, lost Mulroney. Okay, I think they're probably happy to let him go. The fear would be that they've signed some players like Max Mata, New Zealand international, come back to the league. He was at Sligo Rovers, big signing. I think he's picked up an injury pre-season. That seems to be the chat. Aidan Keena, Simon Power, who was a big player for them last year, he's out for a couple of months. So there's just uneasy vibes around the place, and it's just a little bit flat now. That's the flip side. They can go to the Aviva on Sunday and they could try and somehow like energise and lift them. But I think that's one there where it's like there's so much expectation around that Kenny return to Pats. Started off brilliantly last year, was really, really poor. You can't get away from it. Yeah.
Contract until 2029 as well. When it was announced, it was like, this is a long-term project. Like, we're bringing Stephen in and he's going to do what he did in Dundalk and elsewhere and have a lot of success.
Yeah, if they start slowly, like I think it just could be uncomfortable there.
Yeah, I think that it feels like an important season for them and an important season for Stephen Kenny, even though, as you say, like his contract is for the foreseeable, let's say. They sort of, at times last year, they just kind of flattered to deceive. Sometimes can be good to watch and a lot of technically good players, but it just always felt that they had a bit of a soft centre, that there was something that when it came to the crunch or when it came to a big game, that they would be rolled over, and ultimately it kind of did end up like that for them. I suppose in terms of signings, as you said, Dan, like when you bring in lads and they pick up knocks, it's it really does put you on the back foot, and especially going into Sunday, sort of a spectacle or a showpiece to start off the season. One good signing that I'd say they did make, in fairness, is Tempton Ronan Boyce out of Derry. I think that's a good signing. Seasoned League of Ireland player, chips in with an odd goal, which is obviously a bonus when you're a right back. But good signing. But as I say, it's just can they bring that solidity and that kind of a little bit more nastiness into their game to complement the cultured, let's say, players.
They were bottom of the Dublin Derby's league table last year, and their away record was poor. And I suppose that points to maybe that soft centre.
I'll let you both pick one team we haven't mentioned, if anyone is interesting you like, before we finish up.
It probably feels like I'll be interested to see Bows on Sunday. Actually, feels like a little bit of the changing of the guard there. A few lads that have been there through thick and thin, really, probably with Bows over the last number of years. Keith Buckley obviously leaving, Rob Cornwall, James Talbot's gone now as well, and maybe it's Alan Reynolds just putting his stamp on the team. They've probably recruited maybe more physically robust and athletic players, possibly. Objectively, that's just looking in from the outside, and maybe that's something that they're looking to add this year. Because again, there were times last year when they put in some performances, they have some technically very, very good players. So it'll be really interesting for me to see how that transition comes about this year, and is Rennie able to finally put his stamp on a team where it's not easy to come in as a manager, effectively an outsider, and hopefully he can do that. I'd love to see them do well.
What about you?
Yeah, well, I'll probably flip to the other end of the table, maybe, because I think Drogheda will be fine again, and Sligo Rovers, and we'll see how Dundalk get on in Waterford. But I think Galway United is the one that people are probably a little bit apprehensive about. I think a lot of other clubs have made notable signings and did their business early, and like someone like Waterford's paid 50 grand to sign Conan Noonan, and you see things happening. Galway United have, John Caulfield is there. Lost a lot of his big players from last year. They've lost players to other clubs. They're signing players seems a little bit last minute. Like, they seem to have more gaps than most, and they've signed some players that I must admit I don't really know the level. Some of the players have signed a couple of players from the Canadian Premier League. One or two have been in the league before. And I just think there's a lot of good vibes around the league at the moment, in general. And that Galway one is I think it's like they're going to be playing this year in a couple of games in Pearse Stadium because there's works going on in at DC Park. Like, I think the strength of the league is that it's really competitive from top to bottom, and I just hope that Galway are competitive. There's there's a bit of negativity around them, and like hopefully that's not the case, because I think if they're fine, I think they're. Like, naturally, it's more interesting to talk about who's going to win the league, of course. Like, that's where the stories are mainly. But I think the enjoyment in the league and the run-in last year was taken from the fact that every game mattered. Like, every single game had something right, because not everyone was safe from the playoff, or they were pushing for Europe. And I think the battle at the bottom this year could be intense as well. So hopefully there isn't a team that drops off. Galway would be the slight contender if anyone was going to. I just hope that's not the case.
Yeah. So to finish then at the other end of the table, who do you reckon wins the league this year?
Yeah, I still feel like I'm a bit scarred from overthinking it last year and going for Pats. I still feel the Shamrock Rovers have been there, done that. Yes, they're probably going to, because they're seeded and they're back in the Champions route, they're probably going to end up having a long European run again this year. It's heavily weighted in their favour, which is a complication. So if Shells or Derry can get ahead of them by the summer, but then that's the thing, then maybe they'll be distracted. I'm going to go for Rovers with Shells pushing them closest.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I can't really see past Shamrock Rovers. I mean, I know you say their squad will be stretched and stuff, but I think there was a weekend, maybe 2 weekends ago, where they had 2 friendlies, had maybe 12 to 14 players in each squad, and won 3-0 and 6-0. So it's the strength and depth that they have is exceptional. And I know we're talking a lot about recruitment today. Recruitment kind of goes both ways. It's about retaining players too.
Yeah.
And what all the other clubs are trying to catch up on is the sort of continuity and the longevity that they have at Shamrock Rovers. And I just think ultimately that's going to pay off. And I think they'll win the league again, provided they get a good enough start.
So 2 votes for Shamrock Rovers. They certainly look formidable, and they are bookies' favourites heading into this Friday. Good robust League of Ireland preview, guys. Thanks. Just one thing I wanted to mention before we finish up. It is 50 days away from Czechia versus Ireland.
Is it now 50?
Literally 50. It was 70, then it was 60. It's 50.
Have we got to an acceptable threshold where it's
50 is definitely acceptable to get excited.
Yeah, I think the problem with 50 though is it's when you get to around 30 or 20 where all of a sudden minor injuries are a problem. Now someone picks up a knock, it's unless it's really bad. I mean, Josh Cullen, I mean, bloody
Yeah.
hell, it was always going to be, unfortunately, it was always likely to be one. I see Ogbene scored last night. He made us come back. He'd been out since November, and Troy Parrott doing things. And
Great performance last night.
Doing things.
Yeah, AZ Alkmaar 2, FC 21 in the Dutch Cup quarter-final. A goal and an assist for Troy Parrott, scoring the winner in extra time. And a beautiful cushion header for that first goal as well. I was even more impressive than his kind of poacher's finish. 22 goals and 29 appearances for Alkmaar this year. He's humming at the moment.
I know. And now it is just that sense of I just hope everyone is available. But it's kind of, I'd say for the players as well. Like they're only human. Like they could do something this year that is the best thing they do in their career. And while they all have to be selfish, they all have to look after number one. It gets to a stage where, like, if you're having a bit of a humdrum season, that's what's going to be circled in the calendar. What I want to see, like Seamus Coleman's management, like he's so important for that team as well, and he's not really playing, and it's almost a sense of, come on, David Moyes, just a few minutes here and there, protect him, make sure he's fine. But like it hangs over, and this is the thing. You talk about the wider Irish football year. I mean, you forget like what an impact that could have. And maybe for the league season it would be a big massive gap in the middle of it where all of a sudden everyone is completely lost in this bubble, but the long-term payoff from that is could be huge. So you excited?
Yeah, can't wait for it. I mean, sure, we were a million miles away from it 3 months ago, and just to have the excitement or something to build up to is amazing. So yeah, I suppose from a selfish point of view or Donegal man's point of view, about 3 weeks beforehand, if we could get a couple of Premier League games in the Seamus Coleman, that'd be ideal. All right.
Yeah, just one or two.
Not too many. Just to get him ready.
Yeah. Would you be willing to concede now that there is a buzz?
Oh, I heard the Buzz Brothers. Yeah,
there is a buzz.
The Buzz Brothers. Yeah,
and I actually feel myself, my colleague Conan are.
Yeah,
an apology.
I heard your victory. Well, yeah,
like you even having the gall to be talking about the hype coming after, like the way the cold water you poured on us. We were at the ground floor. We saw the step overs. We knew the promise that was to come.
But the slight problem you have with being excited about those games against Bulgaria is that Hamer got to October and basically admitted that all the work he'd done before had been rendered redundant, and he had to rip up the formation that he'd used in all of those games. So effectively, he went back to basics. He basically said, "Do you know what? All that stuff earlier in the year probably was shite."
Convenient for your argument. Then.
Well, it's convenient for yours. You can see.
But I was right. They got to the playoff.
You weren't.
I feel like a mediator between a married couple here.
You weren't. You weren't right. You weren't right. You were excited about the wrong performances, but like
I took one look at of their jib and I said they're going to play.
Okay. No, they come off the floor, but what we can all agree on is, however they come off the floor, they've really come off it in good health. But it will be. I mean, it was just still one amazing week, and there is that sense of that transition from amazing week to just like this being the norm. It's like it's a big leap. It's a big. Maybe we should be looking at all the Czechia injuries and Denmark. Patrick Dorgy got injured. I was a little bit like,
that's really looking ahead. I saw you tweet that.
I was like, and then it was pointed out, well, actually, their first choice isn't Mala. Like Dorgy had been in and out in the side because Denmark are really good, and it's like, okay, that's a little bit of a check to the optimism there.
I know, yeah, but I always just look back at Czechia's results and see that they lost to Faroe Islands. Like,
that's it. That's all that matters.
That's all. Whenever you're feeling, this could be tricky, they lost to Faroe Islands.
Like how Ireland do in Armenia. Oh no, forget about that. We changed our formation. We changed everything. Yeah.